Are we in a video game crash? Right, okay, so let's be honest. The majority of news coming out about gaming at the moment has been like a constant spiral of doom and gloom and misery.
That's right.
And it's just constant. And at present, gaming history is literally unfolding before our very eyes. We are living through something.
Yeah, I want y'all to keep in mind that the Helldivers 2 fuck up, people will bring that up in 10 years. In 10 years from now, people will be like, remember whenever everybody from Helldivers got together and they made the company not do the thing, and everybody's like, yeah, those were the days. And some guy's like, yeah, I was there.
People in
no,
10,
they won't.
20,
they
30
absolutely
years
will.
going to talk about
100%.
very much like we all talk about the video crash of 1983.
Yeah.
And it's a very negative portion of history at the moment. So I wanted to discuss with you basically how the gaming industry has ended up in such a mess this time round, and whether we're already in a crash or whether we are literally charging towards one. And I feel like the obvious place to start with this is back in 2020 in the pandemic. During the pandemic, gaming was literally the saviour of people in lockdown. Everyone's stuck in their homes.
I've been in lockdown for 33 years.
They've got nothing to do. And gaming was just doing really, really well. A lot of people needed it to escape the drudgery of being locked in their houses. There was only 3 choices: social media or TV. Well, you couldn't watch sports anymore. How exciting. Because no one was allowed to even play sports in the first place, let alone get to watch it on TV.
Right.
Therefore, gaming was pretty much one of the only options for many people. And the gaming industry, as a result of that, was absolutely booming, and to an extent.
Yeah, it doubled the amount of people playing video games, probably. I would say COVID probably doubled the amount of average video game players, at least during the time of COVID. Like, if there was 100 people playing video games for every 1,000, now there's 200. And probably it was even more than that. Because, like, yeah, like, you remember Twitch numbers were super fucking high then. Everything on the internet was, like, massively juiced.
They saw themselves as pandemic.
I think that, you know, we were just talking about Genshin Impact. I think Genshin Impact was, like, one of the main beneficiaries of that. Like, Genshin Impact came out at a time where there were no other games that were really kind of like that were very good, that had like that anime style, and it was during COVID. It was crazy. That was perfect fucking timing.
As in, like, the whole world was burning down around them.
Yeah.
Yet they were growing and growing. It was like nothing could stop them. Through this period, did the gaming industry gain a false sense of security? Well, one thing...
I think that every industry did, and I don't think it's a false sense of security. I think that it was just irresponsible expansion, where they saw how much the company was growing from COVID, and they expanded the company in so many different ways that it was unsustainable after COVID kind of stopped happening or fell off. And then they're stuck with all these people. And they're stuck with like all this extra stuff. And like this is happening, like they're, you know, you're kind of burning the candle at both ends here, where you have like obviously people that are like not having to deal with COVID anymore, but you also have the factor of AI, and you have the factor of like other types of like automation that's removing jobs that people had in the industry as well. So not only are you losing customers, you know, in the short term, but you're also losing functionality.
Is for sure. According to the news, the gaming industry is constantly complaining about not making enough money.
Yeah, I wonder
considering
why.
the vast amount of cost that they're putting into everything, with how many hundreds of millions this cost and how many hundreds of millions that cost. Well, of course, they're probably not going to be making the money back on it. But this has seen various companies, as a result of that, laying off thousands and thousands of members of staff to basically try to meet shareholder promises. Multiple expensive AAA games...
Well, they're wasting their money on things that gamers don't care about. Like, I think Senua's Saga is probably the best example of that. It doesn't matter how, like, dark or gritty or realistic or something like that a game is. Like, where's the value proposition? Where's the reason that you're going to log into this game? Why would you do this? I don't think that... I think that's the real problem, is that games don't understand. A lot of these like big game developers, I think that they want to make video games in the same way that people make movies, or in the same way that people like maybe make music or something like that, like TV shows. It's not a TV show. It's not a movie. Like people are like utilizing this for a different reason.
Aren't hitting the sales figures expected or needed, essentially.
And like that's another thing too. Like I unironically think this is probably something that might get people that are like video game developers mad at me. I think a lot of them don't understand video games because they don't play them and or they suck at video games. Meanwhile, you see Kojima playing new video games every single fucking day. He's posting pictures of it constantly. So it's like he's like, you know, watching movies, everything like that. He's like in it, doing it constantly. And it's like, yeah, of course this guy's going to outperform you. Of course he's going to do better because he's wired and he's locked in. Like, meanwhile, what are you doing? You're playing some bullshit indie game? Like, you don't even understand your own game. How are you going to do this? So I think that's the big reason. Yoshi P2? Yeah, exactly. Like, and all of the guys, think about all of the game developers that play a lot of other games. Like, do you remember whenever Blizzard developers started talking a lot about how good Elden Ring was and other games that they started playing, and that was just coincidentally the same time that the game started getting better? Yeah, because they started actually playing other games. That's the issue that a lot of game devs have. I don't think that they understand gaming because they're not gamers. They're not playing games.
Games like Suicide Squad and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are like prime examples of this. I'm not even going to go into like the details about each of those. I've made a video about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Square Enix only last week. So if you want to know a bit more depthy information on that, go find that now or at the end of this video. Others are using the excuse that basically the rising cost of game development is making predatory microtransactions an essential part of gaming's future for it to be sustainable. An example of this would be Tekken 8 stealth dropping paywalled features only after receiving glittering, sparkling reviews, which is cause a huge amount of distrust in their player base. Square Enix released their notification of
recognition of extraordinary losses. I'm pretty sure if this happened in America, it would be followed by a public execution, or maybe multiple.
Extraordinary losses, which is absolutely mental. Again, as I said, I've done a video on
bad.
It. Xbox has just the other day basically closed a load of subsidiaries for Bethesda, which was horrendous considering some of those have released games which are absolute bangers. And then Warner Brothers have announced that they're going to only focus on key franchises such as Mortal Kombat and Harry Potter going forward, and even those are going to an extent get bastardized into service games apparently.
And Warner Brothers is making the right call. What the fuck does Warner Brothers know about making video games? What are you trying to make all these new IPs and do all this new stuff? Oh yeah, we're just going to go into this industry and make a bunch of money? How? You don't even understand it. That's the problem. It's that these people, they keep trying to insert themselves into spaces that they shouldn't be in. And they have no, they have no expertise in. And that's the real issue.
Call to action, it seems, from the execs, is that they want to make more mobile games.
Yeah, I wonder why.
They want to make a whole load of service games with millions of microtransactions so that they can have a constant feed of money coming in off of the general consumer. And they essentially want to put less and less emphasis on traditional one-player games, which you basically pay for once.
Right.
They want you to buy their games and then own nothing and then continue to feed them and then be happy with that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to be fair, you don't own the single-player games either. Ubisoft proved that. But yeah, she's totally right about that. I think that the real reason why this is going to fail is because this is something that's not for the benefit of the customer. There are a lot of games that this works and it makes sense for, like Fortnite or like Helldivers 2. But the reason why it's a problem is that basically the way that I think that these big companies are looking at making a video game is that they don't start with what makes a good game. They start with we need a live service, and then they work backwards from that conclusion. Like, basically, a good game, the conclusion of a good game is, okay, so how should we monetize the game? Like, how should we actually make this work? But the problem with like, new games is that a lot of times that's where they start from. That's the main focus, is like, how are we going to make money with this? What makes money, exactly. And so it's a matter of focus. Like, nobody really cares about like whether a game is live service or not. And I know that I have a lot of people in my audience that are like live service haters. You're probably actually not. I bet with a lot of you guys, you probably play live service games. You don't hate live service games. You hate shitty live service games with cash grab mechanics that aren't fun. That's what you really don't like. Let's be real. Everybody knows it. It's about profit, yes. And so that's the real issue. It's not live service. The problem is that live service for these companies is like, in their mind, what game do, like, you think about who are the executives at Warner Brothers? Probably people that have been in the entertainment industry longer than video games have existed, okay? Let's be real. So these guys don't know anything about games, but they know that Fortnite is really big because maybe their grandkids play it. So they're thinking, oh yeah, let's go do something that's just like this. Let's go do that. And I'm sure that some of them are smart. I'm sure some of them are incredibly dynamic and they really know what they're talking about. But too many of them aren't. Too many of them, and collectively they are not. And there is not a focus, and this is the issue again. And it's such a crazy thing that, like, it seems like so many companies are forgetting the most important thing, is that the customer comes first. And if the customer comes first, everybody is fine, everything is happy. Like Baldur's Gate 3. Customer comes first. In a lot of cases, that's literally how the game worked. And in Helldivers 2, customer comes first. That's the way it works. Sony is incredibly single-player focused, and their games sell and review incredibly well. Yeah, I know, but they're a Japanese company, and I think that they are the exception and not the rule. So they're not part of the culture in the same way that Warner Brothers is, and also I think that there's not a lot of them. So yes, to be honest, most of the people you're ripping on, they do exist, but they often fail. I've seen it in other industries. The market does sort this stuff out. Well, what we're seeing here is that a video game crash is the market sorting itself out. Like, that's clearly what she's saying.
So let me ask you, bearing in mind that most of these decisions that are being made are not actually in the interest of the gamers who are going to be buying and playing these games, but rather only in the short-term interest of shareholders, how is making products that we don't want and gamers don't want going to fix anything? I've come up with two different perspectives.
And you see what happens whenever you try to make a game that people like is you make Pow World. Well, people really want it. Like Pow World, what's your creative vision? Oh, I don't know. I wanted to make a game that people like. And so I took a lot of things that people like and I made it into a game. And guess what? People liked it. What a fucking surprise.
To how this can both have a positive effect and a negative effect, but will ultimately end up sending gaming into a doom spiral. Okay, so the positive consequence. Short-term financial stability. Prioritizing shareholder interests through strategies such as implementing microtransactions and developing mobile and service-based games can provide short-term financial boost. This approach may help stabilize companies financially by tapping into consistent revenue streams, thus allowing them to survive.
I think that the real problem has actually almost nothing to do with a game being pay to win, or even a game having microtransactions. I think that the big problem games are games that are bad. Like, this game is like fundamentally lacking. Like, for example, Hellblade 2. It's a 5 to 7 hour game. It's $50. What the fuck? Diablo 4. The campaign sucks. The end game was non-existent on release. It's $70. What the fuck? Star Wars Outlaws. There's no Jedi? What? You just run around as some random no-name girl with a weird, stupid pet just so they can sell probably fucking, plushies of this pet? They're like, oh yeah, this is why you're adding it in. Like, who gives a fuck? Who cares? Why would anybody care about this? It doesn't look good. And this is the problem, is like all of these games are thinking about the money that they make without even thinking about the value they create. They're not thinking about creating value. They're just thinking about money. It's not about the microtransactions. Like, the reason why people are playing Wuthering Waves or Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, if you don't like microtransactions and you're not at least okay with them, you wouldn't be playing those games. But they're some of the most popular games. Clash of Clans, look at that. Yes, they're super popular. It's not about the monetization structure. It's about the quality of the game. The quality of the game is what matters the most. And the quality of these games is just not there. That's the big problem, more than anything else.
Markets fluctuations and maintain operational capabilities. This financial stability could potentially enable companies to invest in new technologies and innovative projects in the future. This is what they want, but it doesn't mean that this is what they're going to get.
Yeah.
And then the negative consequences.
Because they're only thinking about it from the perspective of the seller. Well, yeah, that sounds... Oh, wow. Wouldn't it be good if everybody just gave us money all the time? Wait.
Long-term consumer distrust.
Oh, my God.
Making products that prioritise profit over player satisfaction can lead to consumer distrust and resentment. Gamers might feel their loyalty and investments are undervalued if they perceive that their interests are consistently secondary to corporate profits. This growing dissatisfaction could lead to a decline in...
Yeah, and also, like, the games are bad. Like, I looked at Suicide Squad. I remember I was watching Shroud play it, and I was like, this doesn't look good. It's really not complicated. It's just that the game is fucking bad. It's crazy. And it's just like, and I feel like, yes, again, the companies are always thinking about the money. And again, you think about the really, really good games that have come out recently. Every really, really, really good game, the reason why it's really good is because it's not focused on a monetization structure. Like, even, like, and this is not a good example, but it goes to show how far a bad example can be almost a good example, is Wuthering Waves. They gave out, like, 2 or 3 now free top-tier characters. Gacha games usually don't do this because then they're worried that people will stop spending money. But the focus was on the user experience. The user experience is what matters, not the monetization structure. This is why Lost Ark died, I think. It's because they focused too much on making money and making whales feel good that they wasted $15,000 on a piece of shit. That's the reason. Is that the moment that you stop thinking about the new player experience, the moment that you stop thinking about what the value proposition is for the customer, is the point where your business starts to die. They did it as an apology, to be fair. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of other companies put out apologies and nobody gets a fucking 5-star. I understand that they put it out as an apology, but the point is that, and that's again, the apology is like, okay, yeah, but who cares, right? This is, oh, I couldn't play the game one day. Are you really going to think about that whenever you add a new character? No, you're not. Because again, they are thinking about it from the perspective of the player. Again, you're thinking about from the perspective of the player. And unless, you know, again, that's what I was saying with like Kojima or like anybody else, like who's posting videos about, like Yoshi P is another one. They're posting videos and like posts about video games all the fucking time. All the time. They're playing video games. And you know, you want to know another great example of this? Dan Clancy on Twitch. Twitch is like fucking 5x better because of Dan Clancy. And you know why? It's because he actually streams. He actually understands what the fuck is going on. That's the reason. And you see this with every single case where people that are involved in their business, people that understand the consumer experience, and fully, like, it's so common that, like, in professional, like, in industry terms, there's a term for it. It's called dog fooding. It's where you're effectively trying your own product as a customer in order to basically simulate the experience of a new customer and to see kind of like what's good and what's bad. So the problem is a lot of these players, I don't think that they don't dog food their own games, and so the games turn out to be dog shit instead.
Brand loyalty, reduced engagement, and ultimately a decrease in the customer base. Over time, this might erode the company's reputation and financial performance, leading to a negative spiral affecting future profitability and viability. We have to be honest, though. I think I think we're already at this stage. So what can we learn from all of this? Basically, the overconfidence generated in the game industry from the record pandemic profits.
I don't even think it's overconfidence. I think that it is pure and unchecked, complete, what's the word? Just not giving a shit. Negligence. Yeah, incompetence. Yeah.
It's completely unfounded and ridiculous.
Yeah, it's irresponsibility.
Because of course people weren't going to continue gaming to the very same level.
Of course.
As soon as they were allowed back outside again, because people were allowed to go out and watch or play sports.
And then here's what's so stupid about it too. It's that this is what COVID did. This is gaming pre-COVID. This is COVID. And this is after COVID. So we're here. Actually, we're not. We're like right here. But if you do the math, gaming is still way bigger than it ever was pre-COVID. And this is true with every social media website too.
Visit family and friends. They were finally
Twitch
allowed
is a great
to,
example of this.
Go on holiday abroad. They were able to even go to restaurants and basically spend time outside touching grass again after a year of not being allowed to. And then also something else to consider is that people in America, their stimulus checks won't have lasted all that long. So they wouldn't have been able to sit there and pay for more games. They would have probably wanted to.
These game companies, she brings up a really good point here. These game companies need to start petitioning and lobbying for universal basic income. Because if you had universal basic income, the amount of video game players would double, if not triple, overnight.
Go out and actually spend their money on something a bit more meaningful than being stuck indoors. So gaming, once again, at that point, would have ended up as a smaller part of life again, like it was prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
But then there's even more to it than that, because essentially the new normal is not normal. I don't really know how else to explain it, but life is different now than it ever was before the pandemic happened. I mean, for one thing, away from gaming, the greater world is struggling to bounce back after all of these lockdowns. A massive...
I do think that, like, especially for younger people, like, for me, COVID didn't change or do anything to me. Like, it didn't affect me. I didn't really care about it. Okay, I have to wear a mask whenever I go into some stores now. Okay. Like, it didn't... Like, I didn't give a shit.
Obvious example of this is Putin. He exploited the world whilst it was weak and used that as almost like a perfect opportunity to invade the Ukraine. This has ended up leading to the oil and gas crisis that has been felt all over the world, regardless of which countries have their own reserves or not. And the general consumer is more or less a bit poorer than they were prior to the pandemic.
It's not even remotely close. I think that people probably lost, like, if you adjust for like all of the price differences, I think that this is like me just like, I this is a vibe check, okay? Like, what the fuck do I know? I feel like people are 40% less wealthy than they were before the pandemic 5 years ago. Like, if you take 2024 versus 2019 or 18, I think people are 20 to 40% less wealthy than they were just in that time period. I'm the opposite. Yes, so am I, but I'm talking about like the average.
They've got other priorities to spend their money on rather than just trivial stuff like
Rich got richer, yeah.
So maybe, just maybe, we can't fully blame the gaming industry for their short-sightedness in these unprecedented times. Except we can. We absolutely can. I think that the gaming industry did know that this would happen, but they needed investor confidence. That's it. They needed money to be able to continue doing what they were doing. But history shows us that pandemics are usually 1/3 of a dark triad, with the other parts of the triad being economic downturns.
Oh, we're having that.
And wars.
Oh, so, yeah. That's gonna be a new patch probably coming out pretty soon too. Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's extremely common. And that's what's going to happen a lot, right? I mean, like, let's be honest. Of course, there's a huge downturn. It's not even a question. Did you ever get COVID? Yeah, I think I got COVID for like 3 days or something. Like, it was not a good time, but over that, Americans spent $2.1 trillion of their savings post-pandemic. It's more than 40%. Well, I'm talking about like the amount, like what is the, like how much can your, like how far does your money go? I feel like your money goes 20 to 40% less far than it did in 2019 to 18. And this is, again, like, as somebody who goes to fast food restaurants all the time, like I go to grocery stores occasionally, like, I go to Walmart or something like that. I'm talking about buying power. Yeah, I'm not talking about like total wealth. I guess, like, yeah, maybe I said wealthy, so it's harder to understand, but I'm really talking about buying power. Like, what can people afford? How much money can people make, right? And the thing is that, like, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but there are now more billionaires than there were pre-COVID. And I think that number went up by like 15 or 20. Now, I could be wrong about this, but that's what I remember.
When you take into consideration that this is actually
millionaires?
The fourth
that could be it too.
Time in recorded history that this has very prominently happened. Before the video game industry was falling, the Roman Empire fell. The Roman Empire, and bear with me, stick with me on this. This isn't a reach. I've got facts to back this up. Number one, the Antonine Plague.
Roman Empire, there was lead poisoning that affected the brains of the people. There's a lot of video game developers that bought Stanley Cups. Stanley Cups had lead in them, and then it's going to get into their brains. They're going to fuck up the games the same way that the Roman Empire got fucked up. Yeah, I understand. For sure. Got it.
And the Marco-Manic Wars, 165 to 180 AD. The pandemic was the Antonine Plague, which was possibly smallpox or measles. It struck the Roman Empire and killed millions, significantly weakening the Roman population. Sure. Then the war, at the same time as that was actually going on, Rome was engaged in the Marco-Manic Wars against the Germanic tribes, which stretched the empire's military resources. So, put it this way, the Roman Empire fell to Gothic titties. And then economic impact. The plague and wars together led to labour shortages, decreased agricultural production, so basically starving people, and a strained economy, contributing to the empire's eventual decline. If anyone's wondering why the Roman Empire didn't last longer than it should have. But here we go. Here's an old favourite that everybody all knows about, the Black Death. The Black Death. Has anyone considered what the Black Death might have to do with a possible video game crash in 2024 or 2025?
Okay.
I've considered it, and here we go. The Black Death and the 100 Years' War, 1347 to 1351, during the ongoing War of 1337 and 1453 between Britain and France. So the pandemic at the time was everyone's old favourite, the bubonic plague.
Oh
the
yeah,
Black
those are in New
Death,
World.
which swept through Europe and ended up killing an estimated 1/3 of the population. The war...
I mean, COVID didn't really kill that many people, right? Like, not compared to the Black Death. Like, I think Black Death was like 1 in 5 or 1 in 3. Like, it was crazy, bro. Like, this shit was like a rapture. Yeah, like COVID, obviously, and there were a lot of people that also died from COVID were like fat or old or something like that. It's not like with the Black Death. I'm sure that obviously like there'd probably be a higher survivorship from people that were healthy, but like most people, as far as I know, that got COVID and died from it had something wrong with them already. The Black Plague was biblical? Yeah, it was.
Period overlapped with the 100 Years' War between England and France, which strained both countries' resources and economies. And the economic impact of this, the pandemic caused massive... I'm not laughing at the horrible suffering, I'm just laughing that I've managed to link this to the gaming crash. The pandemic caused massive labour shortages, leading to economic stagnation and severe social upheavals, compounded by the ongoing costs and disruptions of war. 100 straight years of war indirectly caused or directly caused.
So we only have like what about like 75 left now? Okay.
By the Black Death.
Yeah. And
then there's a third part. The third one, my third example for this is I'm not allowed. Are we allowed to say this anymore? I don't know. The Spanish flu. You're not allowed to say the Chinese virus, are you? The Spanish flu and World War One, 1918.
I don't really think that COVID was like really that big of a factor, because like, I mean, you think about like what would it be like if 1 in every 5 people got killed randomly in like the course of like 20 years, 10 years. Like, this would totally alter society. Like, this would change everything. And obviously, like, and people knew that this was happening, and so they were like trying to take precautions for it. Like, COVID was not even 10% of that. Like, I would be amazed if it was even 1% of that. Like, it's fucking insane how bad the Black Plague was, right? And so, yeah, like blood language, genetic diversity, exactly. Yeah, COVID was worldwide. Yeah, that's at least 1 billion, right? Politics of COVID altered society. I think that COVID did fuck a lot of people up, and it fucked a lot of things up, but I don't think that it goes as deep as like, you know, other like worldwide shifting events. I think that COVID really just kind of got a lot of people to play video games, and that was about it. And I think it also, like, COVID was like a super like accelerant for like mental problems. Like, I think that basically, like, the country's always had, like, a mental person problem, but, like, COVID 2x'd it.
And 1919. The pandemic was the Spanish flu, which emerged on the final year of the First World War and continued into the post-war period, which is why I said 1919, killing an estimated 50 million people worldwide.
That's a lot of people.
When you put that into perspective with COVID-19, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
The war itself was obviously the First World War, which on itself was a massive drain on resources and had already weakened the populations of many, many countries, making them more susceptible to disease. And then the economic impact of that was that the combination of the war and the pandemic led to significant economic downturns across the globe, with production slowdowns, labour force reductions, and long-term social and economic disruptions. The long and short of it,
I feel like a lot of people might not really understand what she's saying with this, because obviously I think she's European or something. Like, in Europe, I think it was like 1 in 5 like men were killed in World War One in a number of countries. And also, like, after World War One, like, countries like Germany were just like fucking deleted, like awful, like, it's just fucking destroyed. So yeah, she kind of oversimplifying. Yeah. And so like over in the US, like, we weren't really affected by World War One that much, right? Like, realistically, not really. At least compared to Europe.
That in dark times, opportunists will take advantage of weakness.
Oh, this
that's
is true.
That's what Putin's done.
Yeah.
That's what people are worried that President Xi's going to do with Taiwan. It's just something that happens every single time. That's why I called it a dark triad, because you don't get one without the other without the other.
Well, I think that she's definitely right about this. Like, and I don't know, like, I mean, whenever you make these analogies to like world events and like world leaders, it's kind of hard to justify it being about video games and it being a one-to-one. I feel like it's like not very good messaging to do that, because it confuses people and it makes people think too much about like the event itself and not about what's being said. It's an overreach, right? I think in general, and it's misleading by doing it, but that's my opinion. Anyway, besides that, I think that this definitely is true, that the pandemic allowed a lot of game companies and a lot of these other companies to do things that people would not be okay with, but people became more okay with because they were just constantly at home and they didn't give a shit. So yeah, I think that the like COVID and all that stuff made it happen way more.
That's literally it. Also, I feel like if I can get all of that information from just doing a quick simple Google search, then I'm pretty sure that the board of directors at all of these massive gaming companies can do the exact same thing. But apparently comforting shareholders and reassuring them about their profits and this wonderful gaming utopia that they have constructed because of the pandemic is so much more important. I mean, after all, with all of this inevitable problems that are going to arise from pandemic and war and economic downturn, of course people are going to prioritize buying a video game.
Well, I think also you have to keep in mind that that's what the shareholders want them to do, and they're elected by the shareholders. They are beholden to the shareholders, so it would make sense that they're going to do things that are in the best interest of the shareholders. It's really just that simple. like, again, this is like an American thing, and so she might not really be like as connected to this, but like basically, like a lot of the like monetization, a lot of like company value is not entirely tangible. Like it's very much like based off of like theoreticals, possibilities, and like a weird fudging of the numbers, right? That this happens quite often. And I think also like quarterly profits are very important too. So I think that's also the big issue. Fiduciary responsibility. Yeah, and by the way, you want this to happen. Everybody says, oh, I don't want this to happen. I don't agree with this. This is bad. Yeah, but what about whenever your company that you're invested in doesn't make any money? Well, then you're complaining and you want to go into a company that makes more money. So it's like everybody simultaneously hates this, but also benefits from it and wants it to keep happening. I think that people have like a very disconnected view on this in general. It's that people obviously want this to happen, but they want it to happen to things that they like, and they don't want it to happen to things that they don't like. That's about it.
To answer my original question, are we in a video game crash? I guess on paper, no. But I personally believe that it's certainly imminent. So thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you very much as well if you have stuck around to this point and humoured me with my bonkers theories and ideas. I swear I'm not some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist. But yes, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, and if you would really like to support me in a more personal way, then please consider checking out my Patreon. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
That was a pretty nice video. I think that whenever you start talking about like world events and stuff like that, it can be kind of hard to compare them to games. And it's hard to follow, you know, like how Putin has to do with like Ukraine, which has to do with COVID, which has to do with video games. It's kind of hard to understand that, like comparing times. Yeah, I think definitely a bit much lost look there. Yeah, I think so too. I like the video. Like the video was fine. I've never seen her videos before. Lady Decade, never seen it at all. But I think that this is going to be something that, like, video games are definitely, like, 100%. AAA is going through a decline. Yeah, I think AAA gaming is going through a decline. A lot of other games are not. Like, I think indie games are growing. I think that the individual, like, the actual, like, collective gaming space is growing tremendously. But the difference is that whenever the gaming space grows tremendously, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is going to grow with it. I think AAA games have like and the reason why AAA games have, I'm disappointed she didn't talk more about the microtransactions, because I actually think that it's true that because video games are getting so expensive now, what ends up happening is that these companies feel like they have to spend money on like making every single game like this AAA, like fucking, you know, blockbuster video game. And the problem is that whenever you put all of your eggs in one basket, well, sometimes the basket doesn't float. And if that basket sinks with all your eggs in it, like Suicide Squad, for example, then you have to completely rethink your entire company strategy. So that's the big issue. What happened to quadruple A? Yeah. Define indie games, please. Baldur's Gate 3 is an indie, but it's also AAA. 400 devs, but also $100 million budget. I don't really think, like, I mean, defining it, like, what is an indie game, what isn't an indie game? I think Baldur's Gate 3, like, you could say it's an indie game, and technically it is, but I think that whenever people say indie game, Baldur's Gate 3 is clearly not what they're thinking of. When I'm thinking of games, I'm thinking of games that are smaller in scope, smaller in scale, that are developed by a very core team of people that are trying to create one specific experience, right? It's AAA. Yeah, it's a AAA game. And people said Larian is a AA studio. And so, yeah, I think that's really what we're talking about, is that these AAA games have become too big to succeed and too big to actually, like, have any real functionality. That's the big issue, I think, more than anything. And like, I think that you see this with Diablo, you see it with Suicide Squad, I think you're going to see it with the new Assassin's Creed game, I think that we've seen it with Immortals of Avenum, you've seen it with Hogwarts Legacy the other way around. These games, like, you invest so much money into these games, and if it doesn't pan out, you're fucked. And I think that's what happened. AAA games are a natural result of evolution of capitalism. AAA means safe investment, so naturally companies invest as much money as they can. It means safe ROI, but it ballooned too much now and it's going to implode. Well, I think it's because their costs rose too much. That's the main issue.